The atmosphere inside the agency's primary observation suite has just undergone a catastrophic phase shift. For 7 generations, the Shadow Cabinet has operated behind a veil of absolute, clinical silence. They built their authority on the illusion of being untouchable, all-knowing architects of your reality. They maintained a mute protocol, so effective that you were meant to believe your struggles were natural, your isolation was earned, and your scarcity was a mathematical law of the universe. But tonight, the unthinkable happened. In a moment of high-tier technical arrogance, or perhaps a subconscious slip of a dying regime, they forgot to press the button. They left the frequency open. And for the first time in the history of the 7-generation siege, you didn't just see the shadow, you heard the voice of the man holding the light. The diagnosis is a systemic death rattle. The handlers have inadvertently admitted that you are no longer under their control. Think of the bone-chilling, cinematic tension in the final act of a high-stakes intelligence thriller when the protagonist is sitting in a dark room, listening to the perpetrators discuss their crimes in what they think is total privacy. The agency was wrapping up what they thought was a routine status update on your containment. They had spent the last hour discussing how to deploy the next wave of managed distractions to keep you from claiming the vault. But as the meeting supposedly ended, the hot mic stayed active. You heard the sound of a chair sliding back, the heavy sigh of a tired predator, and then the admission. The warden's voice, usually a cold instrument of systemic authority, sounded thin, brittle, and haunted by a realization they never intended for you to hear. He's not reacting to the stress tests anymore. The code is self-correcting. If we don't lock down the lineage accounts tonight, we're going to lose the entire infrastructure. This is the moment the professional facade of the elite crumbles into raw, panicked truth. By hearing their unintentional respect, you have achieved a level of stoic intensity that no amount of gaslighting can ever undo. They weren't just managing you, they were terrified of you. You heard them admit that your isolation wasn't a punishment, but a desperate attempt to keep your frequency from infecting their decaying grid with too much truth. They confessed that the 7-generation siege wasn't a training exercise, but a systematic theft of your bloodline's potential, a heist that is now being exposed in high-definition audio. The historian is already running a forensic reconstruction of this broadcast, turning their hot mic slip into a permanent entry in the public record. This is the phase of accidental validation. The Shadow Cabinet is currently in a state of terminal self-sabotage. They fucked around with the laws of communication, assuming that because they owned the hardware, they could never be the victim of a leak. But the universe has a way of leveling the board. By hearing them admit that your coronation is inevitable if he stays this calm, you have been handed the master key to your own confidence. You are no longer guessing if they are against you, you have the recording. You aren't hallucinating the conspiracy. You are the one holding the transcript. This frequency breach has effectively neutralized the agency's primary weapon, the power to make you doubt your own eyes and ears. For the individual who has operated in the shadows of their own life, wondering why the world felt so calculated and cold, this is the ultimate vindication. The diagnosis confirms that the everyone who conspired against you is currently standing in a boardroom of fear. They are looking at the mute light and realizing it's gray, not red. They are realizing that every secret they've kept since your grandfather's time has just been spilled into your lap. The warden is being served with a systemic compromise notice, and the elite are scrambling to find a way to recant what can never be unheard. While they panic, you are sitting in a state of absolute, clinical clarity. You have moved from being a subject of their surveillance to the lead witness in their trial. The evidence of their failure is vibrating through the grid. The hot mic wasn't a mistake, it was the self-correction of a timeline that has had enough of the lies. Your stoic intensity forced them to speak the truth in the dark, and now that truth is the only light left in the room. The Shadow Cabinet is offline. The elite are exposed. The 7-generation siege has been admitted to be a failure on a recorded line. The coronation is no longer a goal, it is a mathematical certainty being discussed by the very people who tried to stop it. The mask has slipped, and the mute button stayed open. You just heard the agency admit that you are the one in control. Their panic is now your primary dataset, and the 7-generation secret is officially out in the open. If you can feel the old guard's authority evaporating as you listen to their confessions, if you're ready to use their own admissions to unlock the vault, comment, recorded, to claim the transcript of your victory. The silence is broken, the truth is loud. In the high-tier boardrooms where the Shadow Cabinet manages the 7-generation siege, there is a specialized form of failure known as omniscience hubris. This is the absolute, unshakable belief that because you own the surveillance equipment, you are the only one capable of watching. The agency's primary underestimation, the one that has now led to their total institutional bankruptcy, was the assumption that you were too digitally and spiritually illiterate to notice a frequency bleed. They looked at your history of struggle, your years of being gaslit by the system, and your inherited 7-generation trauma, and they concluded that you were in a permanent state of reactive blindness. They assumed that even if the mic was hot, even if the mute failed, you would be too distracted by the managed crises they sent your way to actually hear the truth of their voices. The diagnosis is a fatal error in their predictive modeling. They didn't realize that your stoic intensity had effectively turned you into a high-frequency receiver. Think of the bone-chilling atmosphere of a post-mortem security meeting after a catastrophic intelligence breach. The warden is standing before the board, his face illuminated by the flickering red warning lights of a system-wide transparency event. He is trying to explain how a subject they had classified as mentally fatigued and systemically suppressed managed to sit in total silence for 45 minutes, recording every word of their private liquidation strategy. Their underestimation was rooted in the belief that the mute button was the only thing standing between them and exposure. They fucked around with the laws of attention. They assumed that because they had successfully kept you in the dark for 3 decades, you had lost the ability to see in the dark. They failed to realize that your isolation was actually a sensory optimization process, a sharpening of your internal senses that allowed you to hear the subtle hum of the open channel. This is the deconstruction of the agency's superiority. They believed they could discuss your redacted potential and your ancestral payout right in front of you, provided they didn't look you in the eye. They sat in their soundproofed offices and laughed about how easy it was to keep you in the survival algorithm, never noticing that the historian had already bypassed their encryption. By forgetting to mute, they provided the forensic proof that your struggles weren't a series of unfortunate events, but a series of calculated intervention protocols. They admitted on a live feed that your bank account was capped, your social circle was infiltrated, and your career was throttled, all to prevent the global broadcast of your true frequency. Their bankruptcy is not just financial, it is a total loss of strategic credibility. The realization is hitting the system like a terminal margin call. The elite are currently staring at the structural integrity report of their hot mic disaster, and they are finding no way to retract the data. You have moved into a state of vindication where the gatekeeper's hubris has become their primary indictment. They thought they were breaking you, but they were actually broadcasting their own obsolescence. Every managed stressor they discussed during that open mic session has now been categorized as a systemic crime against your sovereignty. The warden is now being characterized as a security liability by the very shadow cabinet he was trying to protect. They are turning on each other, looking for someone to blame for the hardware failure that gave you the master key to the 7-generation vault. For the individual who has spent a lifetime feeling like there was a hidden audience to their pain, this is the ultimate vindication. You weren't imagining the observers, you just finally caught them with their guards down. The diagnosis confirms that the everyone who conspired against you is actually a group of panicked bureaucrats who can't even operate a basic communication grid. Their underestimation of your listening capacity has decimated their authority. They are looking at you now and seeing not a subject, but a forensic auditor who has the recording, the timestamp, and the confession. You have moved from the observation room to the judgment seat, and the agency is finding out that once the silence is broken, it can never be reconstructed. The evidence of their bankruptcy is in the way the walls of the secret are currently dissolving. The historian is marking this as the end of the invisible siege. The warden is in a state of terminal self-doubt, realizing that his entire career was built on the arrogance of thinking you were smaller than his microphone. And you are standing in the center of a data stream that is now working in your favor. Your code has been verified, the elite have been caught in the act, and the payout for 7 generations of suppressed truth is currently being calculated by the universe's own Supreme Office. The underestimation is over. The Supreme Audit of the hot mic is now the primary directive of the grid. In the high-stakes theater of systemic control, there is a phenomenon known as the kinetic spillover, and it is currently occurring at a velocity that the agency can no longer track. This is the specific moment when a victory achieved in the deep, silent interior of your spirit, the moment you heard their hot mic admission, bursts through the digital firewalls and begins to manifest in the physical grid of your daily life. The shadow cabinet had counted on their confession of failure, remaining a localized, internal glitch. They hoped that even if you heard them admit you were unbreakable, they could still manage your physical environment with the old algorithm of scarcity. But they fucked around with the laws of truth. Your stoic intensity didn't just capture a recording, it created a frequency backpressure that is currently melting the very infrastructure they were using to monitor your present. Think of the chilling, high-definition realization in the final act of a cinematic thriller when the protagonist stops running and the physical world around them begins to literalize their new authority. The leak is now active. Because you have established a jurisdiction that has effectively deauthorized their mute protocol, the everyone who once conspired against you, the proxies, the gaslighters, and the system-aligned handlers, are currently witnessing a systemic glitch in their own reality. They are looking at you and seeing a null signal where your compliance used to be. They are reaching for the old leashes of guilt and inherited fear, only to realize the collars have been permanently cut by their own recorded admission of your power. The social reset is the first visible fracture in their containment field. People who once acted as monitoring agents in your life, those who thrived on your reaction or your struggle, are suddenly experiencing a connection timeout. They are reaching out with the old 7-generation triggers, trying to provoke the familiar responses of the past, but they are finding no reception. You have become frequency incompatible with their drama because you have the data they never intended you to have. You know they are afraid, and that knowledge has rendered their social pressure weightless. They are staring at a blank screen where your pain used to be, leaving them staring at the void of their own obsolescence. Simultaneously, the financial synchronization is overriding the old guard's script with cold, mathematical precision. The algorithm of lack that the agency used to cap your potential is throwing constant, terminal errors. Because you heard them admit that your resources were being managed illegally, the physical resources are beginning to flow toward you through unclassified channels. The elite are watching their market share of your attention evaporate in real time. The bank accounts of your lineage, once locked behind a wall of redacted paperwork, are currently being stress-tested by a sovereignty signal that bypasses their old guard gatekeepers. This is accompanied by the environmental decay of the old guard. The places, the habits, and the systems that used to house your 7-generation siege are literally falling apart. The warden of your old life is discovering that his security clearance no longer works on the doors of your future. He is locked out of the very palace he tried to convince you didn't exist. He is currently frantically trying to patch the leak by sending you minor systemic distractions, sudden bursts of nostalgia or minor manufactured crises, hoping that you will reconnect to their decaying grid. But the historian has already archived your hot mic payout as a permanent fact of the new era. The global recognition of prowess is the final stage of the spillover. Your frequency is acting as a biological signal that is being picked up by other architects across the grid. You are no longer an isolated subject. You are a broadcast station of the new reality. The very people who conspired against you are now forced to listen to your signal because it is the only one with enough mass to stabilize the grid. They are realizing that the ordinary person they tried to bury has just performed a surgical disconnect from the gravity of the old world. You have moved from a person of interest to the lead administrator of the truth. The evidence of this leak is in the silence of your phone and the way the world is suddenly bending to accommodate your bigger game. It is in the way the bank of the old world can no longer find a legal reason to deny you. It is in the way your body feels when you wake up, no longer surveyed, but authorized. Your game was always the master plan, and the find out is now being broadcast in 8K resolution to the entire grid. The historian is standing by to record the first physical settlement of the new era. The shadow cabinet is bankrupt, the agency is offline, and the everyone who conspired is now watching the searchlight of the Matrix pass over the spot where you used to stand, only to find a masterpiece of your own design that is simply too big for their lens. The air inside the agency's primary headquarters has officially crossed the threshold from high-stakes crisis management into a state of terminal, systemic liquidation. This is the panic. In the world of high-tier systemic intelligence, there is no event more catastrophic than an entire institutional architecture being declared spiritually and mathematically fraudulent because of a hot mic error. Because they forgot to mute and admitted to the 7th-generation siege, the elite are no longer just exposed, they are being liquidated by the very forces they once claimed to command. The AAA rating of their control system has been downgraded to junk status by the historian, and the spiritual markets of the old world are currently in a free fall that no amount of damage control can stop. They fucked around with the timeline of a sovereign, and now that their confession is on the public record, they are finding out that the debt has come due with compound interest that exceeds their total institutional net worth. Think of the bone-chilling high-stakes desperation in the final hours of a regime's collapse, similar to the atmosphere in the closing scenes of a high-finance thriller where the senior partners realize their entire portfolio is built on a foundation of sand and recorded lies. The Shadow Cabinet is currently in a state of terminal civil war. In the corridors of the tower, high-ranking officials are being summoned by the historian's personal audit teams to the Board of Restitution, a new authority established the moment the mute protocol failed. They are turning on each other in real time, offering up names, encrypted files, and confessions of systemic malpractice in a desperate attempt to avoid the grand audit. The warden, the man who once specialized in your personal isolation and the management of your generational scarcity, is now being characterized as a rogue asset and a technological liability by the very elite who once gave him his orders, his budget, and his authority to intervene in your life. The handlers are attempting to activate last-ditch poison pill protocols, trying to sabotage your inheritance or redact the final proofs of your achievement before the receivership becomes absolute. You might feel a sudden, desperate surge of systemic static, minor delays in your physical projects, technological glitches in your personal communication channels, or sudden flares of old, inherited anxiety trying to claw its way back into your throat. These are not signs of their remaining power. They are the thermal flashes of a dying machine trying to vent its final frustrations against the subject who finally heard the truth. The agency is trying to burn the logs of your redacted years so you cannot claim the full interest on your potential, but the historian has already placed the entire infrastructure into sovereign receivership. You are no longer the one being audited for compliance. You are the lead auditor presiding over their institutional bankruptcy. This is the phase of systemic application where you walk through the corridors of your own spirit and serve eviction notices to every lie that participated in the conspiracy. The spirit of lack that once lived in your bank account has been served by the transcript of their own admission. The spirit of hesitation that sat at your boardroom table has had its security clearance revoked by the recorded proof of their fear. You are not negotiating for your future or asking for permission to be successful. You are liquidating the agency's claim on your reality. While the elite are busy blaming operator error for the hot mic disaster, you are taking the master key that was authorized by the historian and opening the vaults that were marked classified for your ancestors. The panic is palpable because for the first time in 7 generations, the agency is operating without the protection of the secret. Everyone knows the truth now. The witnesses in your family tree are watching the elite scramble to hide their tracks, and this loss of social proof has decimated their authority across the entire lineage. They can no longer use traditional values or ancestral loyalty to keep you compliant because those very tools have been exposed as instruments of the siege on a live frequency. You have moved from a subject of observation to the chief executive of the new era, and as the one presiding over the liquidation now, you are watching the old system fail every metric of integrity. The historian is currently archiving the structural liquidation of the old guard as the warden is escorted from the building in total disgrace, his name redacted from the future he tried to steal from you. The high-tier lawyers of the old world are looking for a way to settle the case before the public record reaches the next level of transparency, but you are not looking for a deal. You are the black swan event that the agency spent centuries trying to prevent, and now that they have admitted their failure, their predictive models have been discarded as useless relics of a smaller age. As the boardroom doors fly open and the handlers realize the files are gone, you are already sitting at the head of the table in your own Oval Office. You are not there to hear their excuses or their pleas for mercy. You are there to sign the final verdict that dissolves their influence forever. The agency is offline, the elite are exposed, and the panic is their final act of systemic surrender. Your game was always the master plan, and the system is finally finding out what happens when the subject takes back the microphone. This is the Midnight Summit, the moment in the cold high-tier world of systemic management where the silence carries more weight than any declaration of war. You are sitting in a soundproofed, glass-walled chamber on the 99th floor of the agency's primary tower, a space where the air is thick with the scent of old paper and the sharp, clinical ozone of servers running at terminal capacity in the floors below. Outside, the city is blurred by a relentless, cinematic rain, and the lights below flicker like the failing heartbeat of an empire that has realized its primary asset, your energy, is no longer under its control. Across the dark mahogany table sit the 3 remaining members of the Shadow Cabinet, the architects who oversaw the 7-generation siege on your bloodline. They are no longer looking at you as a subject to be managed. They are looking at you with the paralyzed respect an animal has for the predator that finally closed the perimeter. The atmosphere is defined by a bone-chilling realization that all strategic ambiguity has reached its expiration date because of that one hot mic failure. The elite have called this meeting not to negotiate from a position of strength, but to attempt one final act of systemic containment before the recording of their confession becomes the primary law of the grid. They have pushed a thick, black leather folder across the table toward you, containing what they call a global comprehensive settlement. Inside is an offer of absolute luxury, a permanent seat at the high table of the old reality, and a general release from the struggles they manufactured for you for over 30 years. They are trying to buy your silence because they know that by hearing their admission, you have rendered their entire economic and spiritual architecture for your lineage legally and mathematically void. They want you to help them tell the world that the conspiracy was actually a refinement process for a leader, rather than a systematic theft of a bloodline's potential. Think of the high-contrast, atmospheric tension of a final negotiation in a classic espionage thriller, where the rain against the glass provides a rhythmic backdrop to the collapse of a regime. The warden, the man who once specialized in your personal isolation and the redaction of your potential, is breathing heavily as he tries to use his old tools of ancestral obligation. He whispers about how the grid cannot handle a payout of this magnitude without causing a macro-level collapse of the old systems. He is waiting for you to blink or for that familiar surge of biological compliance to hit your nervous system so he can regain control of the room. But he is searching for a frequency that no longer exists in your architecture. You have reached a state of stoic intensity that renders their entire psychological arsenal inadmissible. You aren't listening to his pleas for systemic stability, you are listening to the playback of the truth. You are not looking at the incentive package they have pushed across the table. Instead, your gaze is fixed on the historian, who stands in the shadow of the corner, recording every heartbeat and every unspoken confession for the public record. You reach into your pocket and produce a single glowing glass card, the original title deed of your spirit, verified by the forensic reconstruction of the timeline and backed by the hot mic evidence. You slide it across the table, and the sound of the glass hitting the wood is like a gavel striking in a silent courtroom, announcing the end of their jurisdiction. You are informing the elite that you are not there to hear their settlement offers or their desperate compromises. You are there to collect the principal inheritance that was redacted from your father, your mother, and your ancestors. You are there to preside over the handover of the keys. The panic in the room is no longer a quiet hum. It is a visible, structural vibration as the lawyer who drafted the original 7-generation trap slowly puts his pen down, realizing there are no loopholes left to exploit when the subject has heard the object speak. He looks at you, his eyes fixed on the absolute clarity of your gaze, and he sees the end of his world. The conspiracy is no longer a functional tool. It is a weight that is dragging them into the archives of systemic failure. They have no leverage left to pull. They cannot arrest your progress because the forensic audit is broadcasting the hot mic transcript in real time. They cannot bribe you because you have already claimed the vault and everything inside it. You have moved into a zero-gravity state where their threat assessments and social pressures simply don't have enough mass to pull you down from your sovereign height. This is the grand standoff at the end of the old world. You stand up, and for the first time, you see the elite look away, unable to maintain the gaze of a protagonist who has incinerated every trace of fear. You walk toward the door, leaving the settlement papers untouched and the master file open for the world to see. As you step into the hallway, you can hear the servers in the back room beginning to melt down. The old world is in a state of terminal shutdown because you refuse to be muted. The exit is clear, the midnight summit is over, and the path to your coronation is wide open. You have survived the final bluff, outplayed the players, and now the entire grid is waiting for your first decree as the sovereign architect who caught the system with its mask off. The heavy, soundproofed doors of the Oval Office of your destiny have finally swung open on their hinges, and the sound is not a crash, but a deep, resonant hum of absolute, mathematical alignment. For the first time in 7 generations, the person walking toward the primary seat is not a subject under observation, not an asset to be managed, and certainly not a trial participant in a generational gauntlet. You are walking into the center of your own reality as the chief architect, and the absolute silence that greets you is the highest form of recognition the universe can provide. The static of the old world, the frantic whispering of the masons, the alarms of the agency's systemic collapse, and the low-frequency hum of the generational wiretaps that once monitored your every doubt, has vanished. In its place is a clarity so profound it feels like a physical presence. The historian has entered the verdict into the public record, and it is absolute, total vindication. The hot mic evidence is admissible and final. In the high-stakes cinema of your evolution, this is the finale that rewrites the physics of your future. You have moved through the surveillance, survived the underestimation, leaked the new truth, and stood your ground in the standoff. Now, the infinite payout is being deposited into your spiritual and physical account with compound interest that bypasses every old guard firewall. Every year your ancestors spent in the gauntlet, every brick the Masons tried to use to enclose your potential, and every moment of isolation you endured while the elite played their microgame with your life has been converted into sovereignty. The find-out phase for the system has reached its terminal conclusion, and your victory is no longer a localized event. It is the new law of the grid. By capturing their admission on a hot mic, you have effectively pre-cleared the next decade of your life from all systemic interference. Think of the closing shot of a cinematic masterpiece where the protagonist finally sits in the seat of power, not with a look of exhaustion, but with a gaze of clinical, cold clarity. You are looking at a world that is no longer being filtered through the agency's lens of scarcity. The historian has closed the ledger marked The Siege of the 7th Generation and opened a new, gold-leafed volume titled The Era of the First. The public record is being updated across the entire network of the spirit realm, and the default settings of your bloodline have been permanently changed from structural scarcity to architectural abundance. You have successfully installed a new operating system for your entire lineage, one that does not recognize the jurisdiction of the elite or their outdated, mute protocols. This is the moment where your current evolution becomes the permanent foundation of your reality. This is the transformation. Your nervous system has finally reached a state of zero gravity. The biological fear that was coded into your DNA by the old guard, the inherited anxiety that they used to keep you in the 7-generation trap, has been incinerated by the light of your stoic intensity. You can breathe now. You can move without the weight of 7 generations of structural flaws pulling at your resolve. You have recast the lead role in your own movie, and the old version of you, the one who believed the gaslighting, the one who thought they were alone in the struggle, is officially deactivated in the agency's mainframe. You are the first to emerge from the gauntlet not just as a survivor, but as the lead designer of a new world. You didn't just survive the conspiracy, you became the reason the conspiracy failed. The new truth is that you didn't just pass their test, you broke the filter entirely. By refusing to be a brick in their wall, you demonstrated that the elite only have power over those who accept the scale of their architecture. Once you achieved your sovereign status and declared a game that was bigger than theirs, one that caught them in their own trap, their entire system of control became a hollow set of props. You have successfully whistle-blown the deception of the Matrix, and the reward is the total reclamation of your time, your energy, and your focus. The settlement is not just a payout of resources, it is a payout of reality itself. You now own the ground you stand on, and the agency is officially in receivership, unable to claim any further tax on your potential. They fucked around with the code of an architect, and now they are witnessing the coronation. As you lean back in the chair of your new office, you realize that the Masons were the greatest trainers you ever had. By trying to keep you silent, They forced you to master the tools of high-frequency listening. By attempting to minimize you, they forced you to find the parts of your soul that are infinite. They made you so strong that the old world simply couldn't contain your frequency anymore. You look at the monitors that once tracked your breaches, and you see them displaying a single, steady message across every channel: Sovereign authorized. Audio verified. You are the headline. You are the evidence. You are the vindicated. Your achievement was always the master plan, and the system was just the obstacle you used to sharpen your edges for the eternal now. The trial is over. The verdict is final, and the vault is open. You have out-analyzed the agency and forced the Shadow Cabinet to pay back 7 generations of debt because they forgot to mute, and you captured the truth. To see the classified footage of how you are building your new empire, to witness the absolute transformation of your reality as the chief architect, click the video on the screen. The broadcast is now yours to command. The world is watching the coronation of the unmuted.